been started. You can start your meeting at any time.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I want to just wait a minute to see if we can get Janet Cannon here, but let's just check and make sure we can hear everybody. So maybe I see Mark, you're there. I can hear you. Jenny Earl, you came on.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very good.
Jenny.
Okay.
Is there anybody? Sorry. We'll just wait another minute or so until we get Janet on, and then we'll go ahead and start.
Board members, I have Janet, board member Cannon online. She is getting on now, and so give us one more minute.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So we don't have too many board members. Okay, I see people.
Yay.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so we're still waiting for board member Henson, but we have a quorum. So I think we'll go ahead and start. A couple of things I want to check out with you guys, just kind of some ground rules. I will be looking for little hands popping up, but it would almost be more helpful to me if you have your video on and you just physically raise your hand. That way I can see and call on you that way. Either way is fine. Raise your hand if that makes sense to you. Okay, good. Janet, can I see you?
I can't see me.
Oh,
but I'm raising my hand.
okay. If you'll click your
Let's see, there's my video. Okay, let's see if I'm on.
Oh, good work, Janet.
Am I there?
Yes.
Oh, I am. Oh, great.
Board member Earl, can I see your hand? Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in my class. Can I see your hand? Board member Earl, are you there? Let's see.
I am on the phone with board member Earl. She is on.
Okay.
Sorry, it clicked out on me, so I do apologize. I'm back on.
Okay, so Jenny, I was just saying, if you can have your video on, if you want to speak, if you'll physically raise your hand, I think I will be able to see you better. So I just want to make sure, can you turn your video on and I can see you physically raise your hand? Oh, thank you. Okay, you guys all win. The other reminder is just to keep your audio off, keep your audio muted until, just so we don't get that feedback. Okay. Okay, you guys, welcome to Standards and Assessment Committee meeting. So glad you're here. Again, we're still waiting for board member Hanson, but I'm hoping he'll pop up anytime. But since we have a quorum, let's get going. So there's board member Hanson.
I am here. I didn't know I saw myself.
Board member Hanson, we're having a little trouble hearing you. Just try that again.
Okay, I am here this morning.
Okay. So I was just telling them, if you want to speak, I can look at the little hands on the side, but it would be easier for me if you just physically raise your hand because I can see you all. So does that work for you, board member Hanson?
Like this?
Yes. That's good. We'll pretend it's a classroom. Okay.
That's good.
Just a couple of other rules. Sarah Young will be, she'll be changing the screen so you can look on there to see the different items. The other thing is, just like yesterday, we will take a roll call vote. We'll do an action item. And then just another reminder to keep your audio muted until you speak, just so that we don't have feedback and extra noise. So any questions before we get started? Okay, let's go ahead and start with action item number 1, which is early learning standards 3 through 5. Just a reminder that when we do this item, or Jessica will talk to us about that, but just as a brief reminder, if you remember from standards and assessment before, path 1 is where you just have a 30-day review and feedback. It's considered by the writing committee and then the final draft sent to the board. If we choose path 2, that means we have a special session. So just keep those things in mind as they're talking. And then I want to invite Jamie and Jessica to give us some information. So who's going first? Jamie?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So yes, the writing committee had looked at the feedback based off of public comment and then have drafted a new, or have given us a new draft, made the edits that were possible. And so some of the changes that they had made, we found some typographical errors, but there was a lot of positive feedback. They really appreciated the fact that we had the vertical alignment because there are a lot of classrooms that have 3- and 4-year-olds together in the same room. They really liked the easy use of the format and then the explanation of the strands and the standards. The basic mixed feelings were more or less around the design and what it was going to look like, which will come after it's approved, and we'll give that to the graphic artist to do all the changes. So we've taken that into consideration. There were some concerns about whether they were developmentally appropriate and a lot of feedback on that. So the biggest concern that they had was based off of that, and it was lacking the approaches to learning and some of the developmental skills that are critical at this age. And so when I took that feedback back to the writing committee, they revised a new draft. And with that, Sarah, if you could scroll down just a little bit. The biggest change that they've made is they added a separate content area just to address lifelong learning practices. And they did that intently and based off of a lot of feedback from their own professions, but also those based off of public comment. With that, those lifelong learning practices include like the brain development, the social development. And so I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware that that was one of the big changes that were made. Are there any questions as to which pathway, or do you guys have any guidance as to which pathway you would like to choose at this point?
Okay, let's open it up for questions first. Anything to clarify? So, okay, Jenny, board member Earl. Sorry, I had to scroll through. Go ahead.
You're all right. I'm trying to leave my volume off. There's a little bit of construction outside of my house, so hopefully it's.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just had to scroll through and see your little hand, so thank you.
Yes. I have just a couple of recommendations, and if they need to be motions, that's fine. Once again, my concern is the number, right? Like, I just counted on for 4-year-olds, and it's 156 standards. I'm just wondering if there's any way to simplify this. And let me give you an example, okay, so that you can see some of these duplicate themselves. For example, we do recall information, and then under lifelong learning principles, we almost replicate a lot of the same items. So I'm just wondering, is there, and it's the same with under dance movement, and then under physical education, we almost have the same movement. I don't know if there's a way to, it's almost the exact same things listed, but they're in 2 different categories. I don't know if there's a way of actually putting them into one category and then underneath indicating that this is also part of dance, or this is also part of physical. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It makes dancing instead of broadening out. We're simplifying it so it's not, I don't know, so that it's not looking like so much, because really these are basic things and a lot of them overlap. And I'm sure you realize that. I'm just wondering if there's any way to simplify those.
Okay, may I cut in for a minute on that?
Yes.
Okay, so I think these are really valid points. And, as I went through, I saw some similar concerns and some grammatical things. But then I have to keep reminding myself that our job today is to decide the pathway. If we think it needs a special session, we're going to vote for pathway 2. If we think that it doesn't, we can just look at the feedback and take it to the full board, then we're going to vote for pathway 1. So really, I would like Jamie to respond to that, but then I'm wondering if Jennifer Bronson would respond to remind us what the pathways are. And then after that, Janet has a question.
Jenny, I would just like to remind everyone too that the standards at this point will be open for 30-day feedback from the board. And with that, I have a survey ready to go at any point.
Excellent. Thank you for that reminder. Jennifer, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, would you go ahead and just remind board members? Yeah.
Absolutely. This will be the first time we've gone through this cycle, and so this is new for all of us. So pathway 1 is 30-day feedback. We think the changes aren't huge or significant. Then pathway 1 might be more appropriate, that each board member, either pathway, to be clear, the board members get 30 days to review, give their feedback, and then we take it back to committee to make those changes based on board feedback and bring those proposed amendments to the board for approval. In step 2 or pathway 2, you're looking at a special session. So if we think going through the feedback is going to take a number of hours, that would take away from your normal board meeting topics and procedures, then we would establish a special session day in which we would dedicate it to just going through the preschool standards to allow us to have time to really get into each item. So it just depends on how much kind of interest there might be from the board, how much feedback you think there might be from a simplification for redundancy. That was an issue in the previous preschool standards because people are generally working on different sections at different times. So that could definitely be a comment just in the survey Jamie's created. She's got like an overall feedback section that we could put a comment in there from board member Earl, and it sounds like from board member Gravitt, that says, looks like there's some redundant standards. Please go through and reduce the redundancy, and we can just leave them in one key content area and reduce those. So lots of ways to handle that through the 30-day feedback, and then allowing staff with the committee to make those modifications based on that feedback. So that's kind of the 2 pathways. One just goes kind of straight through, brings back the final product to the full board with the expectation that the changes we make will be short and not hours, similar to like science and health, trying to reduce your guys' burden knowing you have other work to get through. Or if we think it's going to need more conversation and a longer amount of time, then pathway 2 might be more appropriate, just knowing the burden that's putting on you all and your colleagues as board members. It will be an extra day or a half day, depending on how long it takes, but it allows us to have that real fruitful conversation and to get the standards right. So whichever way makes the most sense for you all as committee, you will be the ultimate recommendation for that, and then we can kind of get the survey going. Either route requires that 30-day feedback from the board.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I appreciate the reminder that we will have, either way, we're going to have that 30-day place for board member comments. Janet, you had a...
Okay.
Janet, board member Cannon, you had a question?
Thank you. Jennifer answered my question.
Okay. Did board member Earl, would you like to follow up with that?
Yeah, then I don't think we need a full additional session, but what does it need to take to go and kind of condense these a little bit so that those that are, what pathway is that? So that those are redundant, or do we need to just ask them if they would bring it back next month so that we can pick one of those pathways? Does that make sense? So it can be, so it's not redundant. And so we have a finished product going forward.
Okay, no, I think that makes sense. And I think either pathway, and where you're saying, I agree with you, I don't think we need a special session. I think the 30-day is the place where we can make those suggestions. Jessica, will you comment on that?
Sorry, it took me a second to get to the mute button. Yeah, so we will take the 30-day feedback from the board members and take it back to the writing committee to make those adjustments before you guys make the final approval. So by selecting either pathway today opens up that window for us to give you guys the survey and see what feedback you have. And then we take that back to the writing committee throughout those 30 days while we're receiving the feedback, and they can make those changes. Just about the redundancy real quick, when we were doing alignment with all the content areas, a lot of the content areas, especially like fine arts, was done for the specialists. And so there is that overlap because fine arts specialists aren't looking at, standards or the math standards or the ELA standards. So they wanted to make sure those things are in there. But our writing committee could for sure go back and double check and look through those since our specialists and teachers are looking at all of the content.
Thank you, Jessica. Jamie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just was talking about, or I was just thinking about how we're now doing standards concurrently with the other with the other content areas. And so I think that's why there may be some redundancy. They didn't want certain qualities to get left. But I think as long as we are talking to those groups from this point forward and making sure that they're including that but for this document itself, I agree that going back to the writing committee and asking them to look at redundancies is something that we can do.
Good. And I also think a good reminder is that it would be coming back to the full board for discussion.
Correct.
So, any other questions? And if there are no other questions, then we're looking for either a motion. Oh, is that Scott? Board Member Hanson, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I didn't, I thought I understood the process, but where it says committee review, I had anticipated, I guess, that we discussed some of these things and there might be some changes, but I can understand now that without going back to the writing committee, that I guess we're going to collect what the committee and collect what the full board says on the review period, and then go one more round as far as revisions. Is that correct?
It was a little hard to understand. Did somebody else get that and could respond to that?
Internet connection, I'm sure, up here. So the suggestions that are made today are regarded as part of the full board comments, and then everything is integrated after this 30-day period. Is that right? As far as
Jamie or Jessica, will you respond to that? Because our job as a committee, from what I understand, is just to decide the pathway. Then we have the 30 days to absorb, whatever is discussed, decided, the writing committee gets together, and it comes back for the full board. If we choose pathway 2, then we actually move into a special session where we maybe have, a half day, etc.
I understand the pathway 1.
Do you mind if I interject?
Please.
Sorry, Director Thronson of Teaching and Learning. So I think what Scott's asking about is how does this feedback get integrated?
Okay.
Basically, in today's kind of committee meeting, it might be helpful as you guys have reviewed the standards to think about how much is there that you think needs to be revised, and given that kind of in your own mind to help to determine which pathway we go. If you think there's significant revisions needed, then we might want the special session because we'll need to go through more items. If it seems to be more of a minor revision and redundancy will look potentially major just because there'll be a lot taken out. But ultimately, that's a pretty simple fix across the board. So
Good.
If redundancy is like the main concern and there's some other smaller concerns, then I honestly think just my personal impression from what you're sharing this morning, pathway 1 would be sufficient. If there's more drastic concerns, and that's where the committee review today is really about looking at those standards and seeing how much revision does the committee feel there's required to help determine the amount of time that might need to be required to review those suggestions that will come through the board review process. Ultimately, the goal is for every board member to be able to have a voice in the revisions, even if you're not on standards and assessment. So you guys get to kind of really help set the stage for thinking about how much time is this going to take for us to go through in full board, given the revisions we are anticipating may be necessary. So if it's not significant or In this case, like redundancy definitely needs to be addressed, but that's not a significant change in terms of content. But if there are some more significant changes that you're foreseeing, then I might suggest that pathway 2 would be more of the direction to go. But if have just a few things that need to be refined, pathway 1 would probably be sufficient for this.
Thank you.
Either way, the comments you provide really need to go into that survey document so that all of the board members are aware of the comments that went in, because ultimately we will share out all of the feedback with the full board in the session.
Okay, excellent. Scott, does that help you? Does that answer your question?
So what I understand is that the committee, the suggestions of the committee, nothing will be integrated into the standard before it goes to the full board. This is the form the standard will be in when it goes to the board. So we don't have any revision ability.
Not today.
Or is that
correct?
Actually, am I not reading this right? It says revised draft of standards. That's 9. And then from that, we can decide on which pathway to go. I'm revised draft of standards. That is.
So the revised draft is based on.
Wouldn't we want to do that work here before if there's some recommendations and changes before it's pushed onto the full board?
Let me have Jennifer respond to that, because there was a 90-day public review that the revision was based, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So step 9 is the revision based on the public review. Step 10 would be the revision based on board feedback.
Yes.
And so ultimately, and then we bring 11 as that final draft to the board. So the issues the reason this has changed from the previous process where committee was the kind of changing sources, that not everyone's voice was getting heard in the full board. And so this ultimately, instead of a small group having a voice, it's each board member having a voice. So the revision draft is really meant to be revised from public feedback. And then this next round is the public or the board feedback round where everybody gets to participate. And we bring back a revised version to that based on board feedback to the full board meeting.
Okay, so what I'm looking for from committee members is, at this point, I need a motion to say which pathway we want to take. Either we move to go pathway 1 or pathway 2. So that's the motion I'm looking for. Janet.
I believe, I've gone over the standards, and I believe that we could follow pathway 1. I think they're pretty good, although I would like the staff to comment on a couple of the concerns that were noted in public feedback. And they did that briefly, I think, but the 2 concerns were lack of approaches to brain development and lack of social development standards. If they could just comment on those 2 things and what they did to the standards based on that public input.
Okay, so we'll hold your motion, and then we'll have either Jessica or Jamie, whoever feels comfortable, to comment.
Yeah, I can do that. This is Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in an attempt to align to all the content areas that are K through 12 and kind of belong to the education world, we just did those content areas that we have K through 12 standards, which doesn't include approaches to learning or social interactions. And so we had taken those out. There was a big increase in the health standards because health standards previously hadn't existed for kindergarten for us to align to. So we, as the writing committee, felt that the health standards was sufficient to cover those areas, and that they were integrated throughout the document. The feedback from the field was that integrated throughout the document wasn't sufficient, and that they wanted those still called out, that those were important enough, and kind of the essence of what is developmentally appropriate in preschool. So we then went back and integrated the new content area, which is lifelong learning practices, which includes both the approaches to learning and social interactions. And so there was one content area that as preschool staff will be responsible for guiding those standards to be updated, because there won't be a K through 12 equivalent to initiate that revision. So we've included that back in, but that was the initial reason why it wasn't there, is because we felt, it was sufficient in the health standards, and we were trying to align to the K through 12 content areas.
Thank you. Janet, does that help?
Yes, that helps. Thanks for that response.
Okay. Janet, do you want to continue with that motion then?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we follow path 1 of the standards revision process and forward the early learning standards to the board for their 30-day review and feedback.
Okay, thank you. So the motion before the committee is to move to follow path 1 of the standards revision process and forward the early learning standards to the board for a 30-day review and feedback. Is there any discussion to that motion?
Discussion.
Board Member Hanson.
I don't know. I don't know what we set up, but I don't know that we can decide path 1 or path 2 today and see what comment comes out of the 30 days. If that is substantial, then we may say, hey, this needs to go to the full board because there's been a lot of comment from the board. If there's not substantial comment, then we would just submit it. But I'm trying to see the committee's role in looking at the standard that we're going to present to the board. At all. Goes to the full board for a vote. Is that what we're seeing? Does the committee have a opportunity like we have in the past to look at this and say, okay, this is the package that we think should be presented to the board?
So, Patty Norman, will you comment on that?
Yeah, I couldn't hear everything you were saying, Board Member Hanson, but I think I have an understanding of what you were asking. So this step 9 was added in here, which actually added another month into the process. And the reason why was for you as a committee to determine stay in committee for this full discussion of what's been brought back, or if it should go to the full board. So if we remember to when we had the health committee, I think it was the health, or it could have been the science, where it ran into the board meeting as well, and we had committee members able to fulfill the rest of their obligations in attending to the rest of the meetings for the USD. Not. So this step that is now added a month to the process, which is just a decision step of, do we stay here and talk about everything, or is there what's been brought, is it substantial enough just to go to the full board and have that additional day so that everyone has an equal chance to comment on those standards? So I think, does that answer your question? So that's why we've added this next step, one more month in the process, is to try and figure out what that would look like. This is new, of course. We could always revise this process again if this isn't working, but this was the process that that this committee decided we would try this time.
Board Member Hanson, did that help?
I still don't see where the committee, I see that the writing committee is taking all the back in and revising the document, but I don't see that the committee has any revision rights before it goes to the full board for comment.
May I comment? I ask myself. I think the point there is we are making a judgment call. As a committee, we are looking and deciding, do we think this is need extra discussion? Now, let's say it does need extra discussion after the 30-day. We would just do that discussion in full board meeting. The special session would be to kind of, give some extra time to that. But either way, that time is going to be given to it by the full board. So we're just making a judgment call because we've looked at the standards more carefully and we're deciding, do we think the 30 days is going to be enough? Or do we think we need a special session? And again, either way, we're going to be addressing it in full board and everybody will have a chance. But standards and assessment is just making a judgment call. So any other discussion to the motion, or Board Member Hanson, do you want to add to that?
No, I don't. My basic question is, does the Standards and Assessment Committee have any revision ability if this goes to the full board? That is no. Is that correct?
From my understanding, no, but we are making the judgment as to how much. We have equal revision rights as everyone else. Is that correct? Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong.
Dr. Thronson, that's correct. The feedback, how we got to this 12-step revision was that having it just go to committee wasn't working. And so instead of having a few weigh in, we needed everyone to weigh in. And so this committee is really to kind of take stock, talk to your colleagues in preparation for today's meeting around how much revision they see, and then leading out to whether we think it's going to be a lot of feedback or little feedback. And I know it's a prediction thing. And like you said, Board Member Hanson, if we end up with like a barrage, we may have to come back to you and be like, you know what, we're going to go ahead and ask, kind of share with you and recommend maybe a different pathway once we get that collection. But at this point, it's kind of anticipating your colleagues' thinking around how much and how much discussion there might be around these revisions.
Right. And it was to kind of ameliorate that whole perception that only a few were having the opportunity to make revisions and suggestions. So we're trying to broaden the scope a little bit. Any other discussion to that motion? Take a vote.
Yes, I have discussion.
Member Earl?
Yes, I'm agreeing with Scott on this because if we do pathway 1, that means we're done. You're going to say 30 days, but we have no idea. So we're going to have to do pathway 2 so that if there are revisions and people want to put those revisions in. So pathway 2 is, I think, what we're going to need to take. And from there, we would need to put it to full board after that, because otherwise there is not that time allotted for that, for any revisions. So I think it's going to have to be pathway 2 in order to gather the 30-day to know whether or not we needed pathway 1 or 2, which in this case, it would have to just be pathway 2 then.
So what I'm going to do, since we have a motion on the table, and again, I just want to respond to that. Either way, after the 30-day, the full board can come together and we can look at those things. And I see what you're saying, Board Member Earl, but since we have a motion on the table, I think we need to vote on that. And if that gets voted down, we can return to another motion. Okay?
Jenny, this
Yeah.
is Janet.
Yes.
I'm being persuaded by what these my fellow board committee members are saying. Since this is a new process and we haven't done it before, and there seems to be quite a bit of angst, including my own, about where do we give our input on these standards, I think I'd like to withdraw my initial motion and make the motion to follow pathway 2, which might be a safer route for us to feel out the new process and what's happening.
Okay. So stop me if I'm doing it wrong, but Board Member Cannon has withdrawn her motion. And Janet, your new motion is to move to follow path 2 of the standards revision process and forward, I guess it would be forward the early learning standards to the board for a 30-day review and feedback.
Yes.
With a special session. Just follow pathway 2.
Just follow pathway 2, but I think we need to alert everyone on the board that this is their opportunity to look at these standards and give input into any revisions they might want to have made. And then when we get to take a look at all of that input, we will know better about how long a special session might require. If there's not a lot of input from the board and they feel fine with it, then we could probably just do this quickly. But it might be wiser, since this is the first time we've done this, to make that opportunity available.
Okay, Dr. Norman?
I apologize for interrupting. May I make a suggestion or just add some information?
Please.
Since this is a new process, I'm wondering if what we might say instead is to hold this in committee for a month and be able to ask board members for feedback, reminding them of this new process, that they should be giving their feedback so that you guys would have more information to go by in order to judge what the next step is. Because if we don't do that, then what we're asking for the next step to be is to hold a special meeting, to schedule a special day for everyone to come in and provide all the full board feedback at that time. You would not be able to review the feedback first in the committee. Does that make sense? Yeah. So maybe a motion might be to hold in committee and remind board members, have an action item to remind board members and let them see what the feedback is thus far and to gather more feedback from them, so that when you come back next month, you'll have more information to go by, to be a special day held, or if you can make that decision in committee.
Thank you.
That sounds like a wiser route to me. So I'll make the motion. I'll withdraw my second motion and make the motion to hold in committee for 30 days and to notify every board member that for the next 30 days, they have an opportunity to give their input and feedback on the early learning standards.
Let me clarify something. Dr. Norman, were you saying actually not release for 30 days? You were just saying hold it in committee, get feedback, then bring it back, then we make the decision, then it would be 30 days. Is that what you were saying, Patty?
Yeah, let me have Director Thronson. Director Thronson, how does that work into the flow of the work?
So I almost wonder, because the way I was interpreting it was different. I wonder if we release the survey for 30, we can bring back what we have at committee meeting next month, and then they can look at the quantity of feedback to help inform their decision as to whether we stay on pathway 1 or 2. Ultimately, the survey is the same, whether it's pathway 1 or pathway 2. It's just whether we try and build it into the full board meeting or if we build it into a special day. And that way you're more informed, because right now you are having to kind of guesstimate your colleagues' feedback. But by then we'd have a good, because we can release the survey as soon as you guys give us the go today and start 30 days for people to start kind of getting in there and giving us that feedback. We'd have a pretty good body of feedback by the time we come back to committee in April. And that would keep us from delaying any further, not knowing if we go special session, how quickly we'll be able to get that done.
Okay, good. And I think that aligns with actually what Board Member Cannon was saying, correct, Janet? That you were saying release the 30 days and then we will bring it back to committee. And then at that point, we will decide if we need special session. Correct, Janet?
Yes, that's correct. I just want to make sure that we notify everybody on the board.
We'll
and
have that.
let them know this is your chance to give input into these standards.
Okay, so let me restate the motion and you correct me if I'm wrong. So the new motion is to release the early standards for a 30-day review and feedback, notify all board members that that survey is out, remind board members to gather feedback. We also ask board members to make sure they do that. And then we reconvene next month or next committee meeting and we look at the results and then make a decision from there. I know that's a terribly long motion, but does that kind of get at the essence?
Yeah, I think that you've captured what we want to do.
Okay. Are there any discussion? Is there any discussion to that motion, that very long motion? Board Member Earl.
Yeah, I think that gets more at the heart of being able to carry on dialogue, but allowing that to come in such a capacity. We're not racing it, but we're also being able to engage. So yeah, I think that would be completely appropriate.
Excellent. I think you're right. Dr. Norman, and then Board Member Marsh.
Can we restate that motion? Because I know that we have Nora Lee that's going to have to transcribe that.
Yes.
The words will matter. So if we can restate that motion in a way that she'll be able to transcribe it. I got your back, Nora Lee.
I was actually going to try that again and maybe with some help, but
okay.
We'll do that. I just
appreciate that. Thank you.
Board Member Marsh.
I think the idea that we kind of missed first back the survey, and the survey I think is going to be to what Jenny and Scott are asking for, because that will let them review it at their own leisure, send back their comments. By that, we'll have a better feel for what they're doing. So I would ask that we also make sure that goes out to all board members like Dr. Thronson suggested.
Okay, so Nora Lee, I'm going to try to restate the motion. Please slow me down or guide me if I need it. And Janet, the maker of the motion, please clarify or correct me if I'm wrong. So the motion before the committee is to, number 1, release the early learning standards to the board for a 30-day review and feedback. Thumbs up. Number 2, alert board members that that's going to be going out and request their participation in responding to the feedback. Good. Number 3, we bring it back to committee next time we meet. And at that point, we decide whether or not we need special session or pathway 1 or pathway 2. Correct? Okay. Is there anything I'm missing? And Nora Lee, did you get that?
I did.
Okay. Any discussion to that motion? Or are we ready to vote? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just take a roll call vote. So Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson,
Aye.
Board Member Marsh,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That was a great compromise. Oh, any other comments, questions? Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jamie and Jessica, Jennifer, Patty, everyone. Okay, are we ready to move on to the next one? Okay, we are on action item 2, which is 6 through 12, computer science standards request for approval. I'll give you a second to bring that up. Okay, so for this one, we're going to have, I think, Joel, I believe I saw Joel here. You're going to talk to us about this. If you'll go ahead and talk about what we've done, where we are, and what we need to do next.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. Again, this is Joel Marquez. I'm CTE, Computer Science Specialist. We went through the public comment, and majority of the comments that we saw were based mostly on how to teach this and what are the resources. And so we added language at the beginning of the document to clarify that these are not just standalone classes, that these are to be integrated with existing 612 courses. And so the specific classes, again, will be determined by the LEA and the LEA level, and will be represented in their K-12 computer science plan as that they're submitting to the agency. And so, from that point, basically, like I said, it was a minor fix just to clarify that these are to be integrated and not just standalone standards here.
Excellent. And I also want to give a shout out. I love the revision process with the dates. I love that addition. So thank you to all and whoever who did that. Do we have any questions for Joel from committee members? I'm just looking to see if I see any hands up. Oh, Janet, Board Member Coleman.
Yes, my first question is, we do with these standards, like we did with the previous set of standards, where are we determining whether to send these out to the board for their input, or where the action just to approve these and send them on to the board?
So we have a different process, but I would like Joel to respond to that.
At this point, I guess, yes, it's gone through the public comment, and they've, with those minor fixes, I believe we're ready to move on to the next step.
Board Member Cannon.
So, I didn't have a chance when we sent them out before, so I spent some time yesterday going through all these standards, and I do have some questions and some comments. Should I go ahead with those?
Yes.
All right. So it talks about, I'm wondering about keyboarding, because our elementary computer standards don't cover keyboarding. So are there any standards for keyboarding, or where do we do keyboarding? Because you base these standards on keyboarding competency.
Keyboarding is actually not a computer science course. It is what we're dealing with here is a non-core process, and keyboarding is not actually considered a computer science course, and based on the master plan and such.
So can you just give us an idea of how and when children are introduced and expected to learn keyboarding throughout the state? Is there somebody that's overseeing keyboarding for all of our students?
As of right now, from what I understand, and having worked with Ashley Higgs, who's been over the keyboarding, keyboarding is actually being introduced later in the elementary schools right now, and it's not based on their speed, but touch, being able to appropriately key rather than speed. And once they get the keying down, then they can work on the speed. So that's where it's based on right now, and it is being introduced later in the elementary schools, as far as I understand.
Sarah, will you comment on that, please?
Sure, thank you. So Sarah Young, Director of Strategic Initiatives, just 2 quick points of clarification. So first and foremost, that we are following the standards revision process for non-core courses, which is just slightly different as Joel articulated. Second of all, we do have a set of keyboarding standards that are overseen by specialist Ashley Higgs that are again specific to the elementary school. So that's why you don't see those reflected in the 612 computer science standards. It's a separate document.
Thank you for that clarification. Jen, does that help? And
yes, that's very helpful. May I continue with a couple of other things?
Of course.
Okay, so I went through these. I think that what is the strongest thing about these computer science standards are the examples that you have listed and how they might be taught and included in the classroom. There are some examples that you give that I believe would be utilized in a social science class, like you bring in some history. There are some that obviously would relate to a math class. And some even that relate to an English class. So I think the more examples that you have for teachers, those are the most valuable things about the standards to me, especially when these standards are intended to be integrated into different courses. One thing I did notice that you use pseudocode, the term pseudocode in some of the standards, and I looked it up in a dictionary. That there wasn't anything in the dictionary, but I think it should be included in your glossary. So if you would make that change, I would appreciate that. And then I don't know, I'd love to see, since this is to be integrated, I'd love to see more examples of how teachers in different classes could integrate all of these different things. We do that to some degree. I'd like to see more of it. Those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Joel, do you want to comment on that? And then we have Board Member Earl has some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely add the pseudocode definition to glossary. That's not a problem. We'll go ahead and make that change. Also, as far as the more examples and such, as we've done with the case 5 standards, that's in the process right now of creating core guides. Mm-hmm. And so we will have supplemental core guides that will go with this as well.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The core guides is where the examples would go. Board Member Earl, would you like to ask a question or comment?
Yeah, I do apologize. The full standards aren't listed under our document unless I'm missing it somewhere. Can someone direct me to where those at on Civic Clerk?
Yeah, I had to go back.
There's some changes.
Wait. Is Dr. Norman, is that you?
Yes, this is me. I want to direct everyone over to the chat box where we have some people that are filling in information for us.
Okay.
So we have Assistant Superintendent Darren Nilsson, who has provided the link to the keyboarding standards. Ashley Higgs is also on that can speak to the elementary keyboarding standards as well. And we are going to, right there, if you look, there's the link that is going for these standards. These are CTE standards that are on there. So if we can, if you want to talk to the chat box, if you want to hold for a second or bring them up. Sarah is also on directing us to how to get to those standards right now online.
Okay. My only concern is I reviewed what was on here, which was minimal changes, but I do apologize. Maybe I should have called in and asked and said, where's the rest of them? So, because we would be looking at the whole thing. Is that accurate or just these changes? I was under the impression it was just the changes that were listed here because that's what was on our Civic Clerk. Is that an error on my part?
No, I think, because if you look at the process, like when I look back, we had a full board review in December.
Right.
We had a public review January through February. We did a revision in February. So I think there's an assumption that we have looked through all of them and we're looking at the changes. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
So are the changes all contained in the one page that was on Civic Clerk? Because that's all
what I'm wondering.
Joel, would you comment on that?
Page there.
Right. Yeah, they were very minor changes. I guess the only thing that we needed to add was in the beginning, just to let everyone know that these were to be integrated. I don't think there was anything on the in the beginning that clarified that these were not standalone classes, that they are to be integrated in the existing 612 core courses.
Right. Okay, does that answer your question, I think, board members?
Well, I would have liked to have looked through the actual standards that we're approving, but
Yeah, Jenny, I did go back to the November meeting. I think it was, or December, and I thought I have not studied these sufficiently, so I spent some time going through them because I couldn't find them in our documents for this month.
Okay, board member Hanson, you wanted to comment.
Same thread, I think. We need to post the full standard that we're approving, not just one page, but the full standard on civic so that we can look at that. I don't know if there are any other changes in the document. We only got that. When I posted last night, that's all I could see. Maybe we need to. Jana's probably the only one who's done the full review for this meeting because I
went back and looked.
Okay.
I think that's really good feedback. I think just the assumption, not maybe we learned from this, but I think the assumption was because we approved it or we were just looking at the changes. But does anyone want to comment on that?
So this is Sarah Young. I just want to take responsibility associated with this. It was my effort to try and put up the full document with that page in there. So the fact that it wasn't, I just want to take responsibility for that. That was certainly my error. Our intent was to have it embedded with the full document. It must have just gotten separated as part of our editing process. So that's my apologies.
Thank you, Sarah, for helping us understand, and we forgive you. Always. Board Member Earl.
I just want a point of clarification then. So we are going to push this, possibly, if we make that motion, push this forward for the K-12 standards, computer science standards, to be approved by the board.
6 through 12, but yes.
We're not just recommending a change to the edit that's on our board docs, right?
We are moving to approve the 6 through 12 computer science standards as amended, like with the definition, to the full board for discussion. Yes.
Okay. Well, once again, I feel like I have not gone through the full thing, and I apologize for that because I used this as the resource, so I do apologize, but I don't feel like I could push this on yet because I haven't had time to go through that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. So at this point, just to get things going, I think I will make the motion and then we can start from there to move to approve the 6 through 12 computer science standards as amended and forward to the full board. So since we have a motion on the table, is there any discussion to that motion that hasn't already been discussed? See if I see any hands. You might have to speak up. Okay, then let's take a vote. I'll just do a roll call. All those in favor, Board Member Marsh?
Aye.
Board Member Cannon?
No, because I think we need to have the entire document vetted by the committee.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Hanson? Is that, sorry, Scott, are you saying no? Nod your head. Okay, can hear you. Board Member.
I'm no as well.
Okay, I'm a yes, but that motion fails in committee. So I guess let me talk to Board Member Earl.
I would just make a motion that we bring this back next month so we can complete this process and move it forward.
Okay, can I check in with Dr. Norman and have her comment on the time sensitivity, or Joel, one or the other?
I was just asking that question, so let's ask Joel himself. Thank you.
Right. Basically, we're just trying to get this up and running with the way the computer science standards are rolling, and in consideration of the full grant that's going out to the teachers and LEAs need these standards to to move forward and make sure that the teachers are getting the information they need so that they are teaching to what is presented for the state. Again, if no big deal, we'll just get it next month if it comes to that. But they'll be time to get used to those. So we're good. We're good.
Okay. And hopefully, where it won't be a month later, hopefully we'll be meeting sooner than that. Board Member Earl, you want to comment?
That was my comment, is I think we might be only 2 weeks out if we wanted to schedule just a quick meeting for this, or a shorter meeting, or a 1 week. I don't know when we're meeting next.
Yeah.
If we wanted to do something like that, I don't see, a week is enough time for me to go through them.
Exactly. So, Board Member Earl, will you restate your new motion?
Okay, I would just make a motion that our next meeting, we include these on for review, for complete review.
Okay, so if I'm understanding, the motion is to bring these back to our next standards and assessment meeting, and then at that point, we will either move to approve or not the 6 through 12 computer science standards. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Accurate.
Norlie, did you understand that?
I did.
Okay, thank you. And then Board Member Cannon, you have a comment?
I just have some discussion that I found here at the bottom of my notes. So when we come back, I would like to have staff comment on how these standards relate to the computer science classes that are currently being taught in the state of Utah. That's one question. The second question, how are teachers supposed to integrate these standards into the core subjects? And then the last question is, how will we know if these standards are being used by the field?
Okay, Joel, did you get those questions, and would you be able to comment on those next month?
Yes, absolutely. I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion to that motion?
Board Member Cannon, this is Ashley Higgs over CTE specialist. Would you mind emailing those questions to Joel, and he will forward it to the CS team so that we make sure that we address those?
I'd be happy. Is it joel.marquez@schools.utah.gov?
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So with that, let's take a vote on the motion to bring these back next month before we move to approve the 6-12 computer standards. We'll have some questions answered and some clarifications. So let me just go through the list. Board Member Marsh?
Aye.
Board Member Cannon?
Aye.
Board Member Hanson?
Aye.
And Board Member Earl?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Okay, give you a second. We're going to move on to action item number 3, which is R277473. This is an amendment, the Utah Computer Science Grant. Sounds like we just need some changes in the reporting requirements. There's some other things. It's moving to a competitive model. I don't know if Jeff or Sarah, which one's going to comment on this, but I'll turn it over to either one of you.
Great, thank you. So Sarah Young, Director of Strategic Initiatives. I'm actually going to stop sharing so that we can have Joel Marquez kind of lead out on what these 3 primary changes are. And then we will switch over to Jeff Van Holten to be able to share his screen in regards to being able to potentially make changes to the rule.
Excellent, thank you.
Hey, bear with me 1 second while I switch this over. All right. Can everyone see that all right?
We can see you.
Can't see my screen. Okay. Let me try to fix that here real quick. Sharing my content. There we go. Okay, there we go. Does everyone see that now?
Yes, good work.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so just want to report first on the reporting elements that the LEAs are to report on for the funding and such. First one's the fiscal year engagement tables. Basically, their data analysis. Again, this is pages 22 through 25 in the master plan. Basically, it's just how they're progressing in computer science, who's getting the training, how are the teachers doing in doing this, and where's the computer science courses being taught, and how are they integrating those into each grade level on that section there. Again, progress towards achieving the goals and measures through the plan, and then documentation of how they're using those funds, both planning grant and the computer science grant, that full grant here. And then again, if there's any other information requested by the superintendent, we'll add that and share that out with them. Here's how the breakdown is of the funds as it stands right now. So again, we were awarded the $7,200,000 of that will go to the administration costs, and then we'll have $6.8 million accessible for the CS funding. Again, this has moved to a competitive grant process. This will allow us to fund up to 27 LEAs should they all request $250,000 a year. Again, that's up to, we don't, some may not ask for that full amount, but if it were up to $250,000 per year for the life of the grant for the 4 years, we would be able to fund 27 LEAs in this competitive process. The way that we have led out this timeline is we've decided that we're going to have an early action application. We have had some LEAs reach out to us and say, hey, we need this money to fulfill some teaching assignments. And so this is there. It's really for everyone. However, those who need that teaching assignment fulfilled, this is an opportunity for them to reach out. So those applications will be due May 15th of this year. And again, we're releasing 20% of those funds. We decided to do, sort of model the college entries, where they allow 20% of the of applicants to apply and be accepted. And so this is where we're going to release about 20% of our funds, which is $1,360,000. And then those funds may fund up to 5 to 7 LEAs if they were to request up to 250,000. So depending on how that goes. Again, the final application, the first rounds will be due July 1st. We push that back from May 1st actually. So we now have those remaining funds will be available then, and we'll fund the rest, the 20 to 22 LEAs, and then we'll have that second round next year available. So that's where we're standing now with projected timeline and our different structure of how we're doing that.
Okay, Board Member Hanson has a question.
Okay.
And my question was, do we have an option to award less than what the LEA requests for the grant? So if they request 250, do we have to, is it all or nothing, or can we give them 125?
Sarah, would you be able to help me out with that one as far as funding?
Of course. Yep. So Sarah Young with Director of Strategic Initiatives. That's a great clarification. So when the board rule says up to 250,000, that allows for an LEA to apply for the funding they need, but capped at that level. So it's possible, number one, they may ask for less than that. The second component in regards to the recommendations, these plans are reviewed by the State Board of Education's Computer Science Advisory Board, and they will make recommendations to the board that can include a adjusting the award amount based on the quality of the application and the competitive nature of the process. So you'll receive those recommendations and then have the opportunity to make final decisions.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, are there any other questions? Oh, Board Member Earl.
Yeah, so my question is, do these primarily fund teachers, or is it a conglomeration of things? For example, is it teachers and licensing of programs or computers? Or is it they can put together a full package of items that they would fund it with?
Right, this could be a full package, like you said. So they could use this for teacher stipends. They could use it for equipment that is needed, or like you said, licensing for materials, or I guess programs that they may need or use in the course. So
it's not. Oh, go ahead.
Anything that is used to progress computer science in the LEAs is what these funds are for, and what we've explained to them. So
it's not limited. In other words, they can use it as long as they can justify and say, this is what's going to be successful at our school, they can use that. Yes. It can justify it too. Okay, thank you.
Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. What we're looking at today is a rule, and part of the amendment to the rule says that the planning grant requirement to submit a plan the year after an LEA receives the grant will be changed from just 1 year after they receive the grant to 2 years after they receive the grant. Can you explain to us the reasoning behind that change?
Well, before, as the master plan had suggested that this would be a qualifying grant, because we received less than the requested amount, it then moved to a competitive grant. And so that application process is going to be a lot different than what a qualifying grant application would look like. And so they're going to need a little more time to gather all that information and create a competitive application in that sense.
Hey, any other questions? Board Member Hanson.
There. That being said, on the rule, I'm looking at lines 100 and 101. And as I read those, it appears that with this language, we can only give the LEA's requested amount up to $250,000 for 4 years. I think that we need to revise that language to say an LEA with an approved plan may receive up to the LEA's requested amount, up to $250,000 for 4 years. That may not be the slickest way to word that, but somehow we need to get that meaning across, because I believe we're limited to the requested amount the way that's written right now.
Joel, would you be able to pass the presenter tool to Jeff Van Holten so he can put that on the screen?
Absolutely. Let me pull this out here. Oh, hold on. Sorry. There you go. Did I stop sharing?
Yeah. Yep, you're good. So just let's give our policy advisor, Jeff Van Holten, just a moment to get that on the screen for your board members.
Okay, I want to make sure. This is Jeff Van Holten. Do you see the document?
Yes.
So we see the school nurses document, not the computer science one.
Let me pull up the correct one. There we go.
Oh, we see computer science now.
There it is.
So my line numbers, I apologize, might be slightly different just because I'm opening the Word docs and the PDFs might have a slightly different line numbering. So I'm looking at line 96 and 97 on my screen, which Board Member Hanson, I believe, is what you are referring to. And if I understand correctly, you are saying you would like it to say something to the effect of may receive the LEA's requested amount or up to the LEA's requested amount and up to 250,000 for 4 years. Is that correct?
I believe that we could just where we've stricken up to in the first instance. I think we could just leave that in. It doesn't read very cleanly, but I think that's the meaning we want to convey.
Jeff, is that an easy change?
Very easy.
And that sticks with the integrity of the document like that. That's okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense to me too. Any other questions? Or Jeff, did you want to talk about anything with the rule?
Not in particular. If there aren't any questions, I did want to highlight just a couple of things. On the screen, you'll see lines 103 down to 116. There's some changes. What we have there are, and actually, I believe Board Member Cannon has a question.
She does. I just wanted to let you through. Cannon, go ahead.
I have to unmute myself. So my question was on line 122. So it currently reads, if an LEA's plan is not approved during year 1 of the program, the advisory committee and superintendent shall provide additional supports. But as we amend the document, we're giving them 2 years to get their plan approved. So should that be amended?
Jeff?
So the plan versus the grant. So just trying to orient myself here. So I believe I'm looking at line 117. Is that correct on the screen?
Oh, I don't know. I pulled mine. It's 122 on mine.
Jeff, you're correct. It's 117 on yours, where it says 5A.
So this is related to the plan being approved, not the grant for the implementation of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in year 1 of the program, so you are applying to get a plan approved and your plan does not get approved, this would give additional supports. So that is actually a separate issue from the 2 years that you would have to get your planning process rolling. Does that make sense?
Oh,
So
okay. I have written down that there was the requirement was to submit a plan the year after, and the change was to giving them 2 years to submit the plan. Am I wrong on that?
And I believe Joe wants to comment on that.
If I may clarify, what this is saying is if the LEA presents a plan to us and it does not pass by the advisory board, the advisory board will offer suggestions and give them feedback as to what they need to fix up so that they can then apply the next year to go through that process. Hopefully that may help.
Good. Does that help, Janet?
I will think about it and see if it helps.
Okay. Board Member Earl, question?
Yes. So on line 160, I'm wondering if we want to change that from 6 students to 10 students. And the reason why is just because when we report data, it's usually greater than 10, or we indicate that it's not. We indicate the symbol instead of 6. Is there a reason why it is 6 instead of a 10?
So Joel or Jeff, would you comment on that, please?
This is Jeff. I can respond to that. So this language added in this section of the new reporting requirements was actually taken out of a Senate bill that was run by Senator Deidre Henderson. She was going to run a new program for the Girls Code organization, and the compromise we made session was we would take the reporting requirements from her bill and put it in. So what you're seeing is actually just a direct copy and paste from the bill. So in her bill, she had fewer than 6. I don't know if you or Sarah feel tied to 6 versus 10. I think personally, I don't think there's a difference if we want to make it 10.
I just know on data, reporting of data standards, anything less than 10 as far as personal data, we don't report on it. We just indicate the number, I believe, in some way, so that it's not, well, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter in this case, in this area. Maybe we just need to look into that, see if that needs to be changed for a board meeting. So.
And Board Member Earl, this is Sarah Young, Director of Strategic Initiatives. We're very amenable to that change. So I don't think that number difference is going to make a significant difference in regards to what that reporting looks like. We're happy to go to 10 just to reflect that consistency in the agency.
Yeah, I think that would be wise.
Okay.
Can I speak to that?
Oh, go ahead, Board Member Hanson.
Yeah, generally I'm on board with the 10 students, but here in the context, we're talking about CS classes, which may only have 20, 25 kids in it. And we're trying to see if underserved groups are in that class. And I think we're going to end up with a lot of symbols if we go to the 10, because we may only have 2 groups of 10 in that class. So I don't know if that was a consideration, but I can see that this will make it hard to bring out the data that we want to get.
Yes.
Okay, and that's why I was asking the question. I wondered if it was applicable here or not. So maybe if we have current data, we could get a better understanding how many symbols. Maybe we don't have current data.
I believe that's the whole point that the Girls Who Code we're looking at. If you read the letter, they're trying to figure out if these underserved populations are really being integrated into CS classes. So I think 6 is actually going to be very difficult to, in a lot of schools, we won't get a lot of data even with the 6 in there. If I think about rural schools and we're talking about girls or we're talking about race and ethnicity, there may only be 1 or 2 kids in each of those groups that are in a class, and we just won't be able to see it.
Good point. I agree.
Okay, well, I'm fine with 6 too, and that's just, I was just thinking of the data collection we do, just making sure that aligns. If 6 is usable, let's do that.
Great discussion. Seeing any other hands? Okay, Board Member Hanson.
A motion to adopt the draft of R277-473 as amended and put it before the full board.
Okay. The motion before the committee is to approve R277-473 draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Not seeing any. Let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, Board Member Marsh?
Aye.
Board Member Cannon?
Aye.
Board Member Hanson?
Aye.
Board Member Earl?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel. Okay, we're going to move on to action item 4. Sarah, are you you're driving the ship again?
Actually,
nope. I believe we're staying with policy staff.
Okay, so this is action item number 4. It's R277-415, the school nurses matching funds. This is an amendment. I think we're going to go to a 3-year cycle. And Jeffrey Van Holten, if you will talk to us about this.
Yes. So, and we also have Betty Sue Hinken on the line as well. And she's able to speak to these changes as well. They are very quick and simple changes. So on the screen, and again, I apologize, the line numbering is slightly different on the screen than on Civic Clerk. You will see on line 33 on the screen, we are moving the annual to a 3-year cycle. That's the one big change. And the second change is actually down on line 38 and 39 on the screen. you'll notice we used to compare the percentage of change in the school nurse FTE count to the 2007 count. And we have now changed that to compare that to the previous year, the previous school year's count rather than 2007 count. And I'm going to pass it off over to Betty Sue so she can kind of explain the impetus behind these changes and why we're seeking them.
Thank you. Hi, Betty Sue.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the intent of this legislation was to increase school nurse FTE, and that was why the 2007 date was put in there originally. That has become quite cumbersome to compare it to, and after talking with Jeff, he thought it would be much more appropriate to compare it to the previous year. So that's why that change was made. And then I am the only one currently that manages this grant, and I don't work for you. I work for the Department of Health, and it's become very cumbersome for me to be managing this grant annually. So hopefully the every 3 years will ease that until we can get an FTE school nurse at the board that can manage this better anyway.
Great, thank you. Let's see if there are any questions from committee members. Board Member Hanson.
First question is with regard to line 37 and 38 on my copy, which I believe is the lines that Jeff was just talking about. 38 and 39, it's on the screen. If we're going to a 3-year cycle, do we want to look at the, I don't know what the previous fiscal year actually means. Do we want to look at the 3 years before and see how much it's increased in the last 3 years? Or are we looking at the year prior to the renewal application, which would be year 3 of the 3-year cycle?
I don't know if Jeff wants to answer that, but I would assume it would be the year prior to when the application is received.
Okay, and so when we look at percentage of change, so that would just be a 1 year change. How many nurses were added in that 1 year?
Yes.
So if we're going to a 3-year cycle, would it make more sense to go back and say how many nurses have been added in the previous 3 years and then make a determination on what we're going to do for the next 3 years?
Potentially, I'm not sure.
So I'm going to just type up here. Are you suggesting, as I just put on the screen, instead of saying the previous fiscal year, we say the previous 3 fiscal years?
Well, it would be the 3rd year prior. If we established a baseline, it would be when they got the grant the last time, when they, at the last cycle. So that would be year 3 of the last cycle. And then we'd say in the 3 years since that time, we've increased by this many FTE. Now we'd make a determination on that. So it would be a 3-year period. I think if we're going to 3-year blocks, it may make more sense to look at the improvement or the add over 3 years. And that's just an idea. I don't know the ins and outs of the program and what you're trying to do here, but that seems like it would make more sense than looking at a 1-year period.
Would that change I highlighted on line 39 speak to that concern? And Betty Sue, the question would also be to you. Do you have concerns about that?
I think that would be fine. I have no concerns.
Jeff, will you just read the change just because it's really small?
Yes, maybe I should.
Much better, much better.
So on line 39 right there, it would be instead of the previous fiscal year, so just assume fiscal is deleted as well, it would say the previous 3-year period from the last application.
Scott, does that reflect your concern?
Yes, if that's okay with the people who are in the know on this, I think that makes more sense just from a broad look at it. I have another question about lines 64 and 65 on my page. This is the funding amounts and sources of funding for school nurses employed prior to state fiscal year 2008. We did away with the 2007, which I believe was linked to this. Should this also be related to the previous application? Is there a reason that 2008 is a benchmark year here when we took it out, took the 2007 out in the other place?
I think that's actually, as long as Betty Sue, if you don't have an issue with that. So we would be saying, I've got highlighted here on line 65 and 66. Board Member Hanson, if I understand correctly, you're saying we should be looking at the funding amounts and sources of funding for school nurses employed prior to, let me think this through for just a moment. I apologize. I'm thinking in the moment. I think this is.
I think this refers to this not supplanting, which was about the only requirement was to match the funds and not supplant funds that had been used prior for school nursing. So I'm not sure it's the same, but I defer to our legal expert.
Yeah, it is slightly different. So we would be saying in relation to the supplant, you could not, we have to ensure the appropriation for school nurses received does not supplant previous school nursing costs, including any of the costs that were used prior to 2008. And I don't know why we made that policy call back the last time we edited this rule, but it is saying that any funding we've had since 2008 would not necessarily be considered a supplant.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. 2008 is ancient history now. There may not have been any school nurses in some of these places. Don't we want to look at, I understand we don't want them to use this money to offset money that they would have taken from other sources to use for school nurses. Can we say that in a more direct way? Because I don't think this has any meaning. I don't know that many LEAs could go back to 2008 and say, this was our budget for school nurses and we haven't, I don't know if there's any meaning to that line the way it is now. Do that?
Would it be helpful to remove lines, according to my copy, line 64, 65, and 66? And just end at supplant previous school nursing costs?
Mm-hmm.
Benchmark, but could it go back to the previous funding cycle or something?
Mm-hmm. No, I see what you're saying. And Betty Sue, you tell me what you think about this. And thank you, everyone, as we group think together online. I think, and I don't actually recall the last time this rule was amended, but it's clear that the way this was written, we didn't want money prior to the 2008 fiscal year to count. We don't want to switch the money out essentially with the grant money. So I'm just thinking that Scott, you're pointing out is correct, that we would probably want to not have the money coming in replace any previous money that has been given. So we would be looking at it in, you can't supplant money you have put toward nursing in the previous 3 years funding cycle with the new money you're getting.
Yeah, that rings more true in my mind to the intent of what we're trying to do, because I think, going back to 2008 or just saying can't supplant, neither one of those are going to provide a standard that we could actually go back and check on.
Okay.
So maybe
let Jeff wordsmith it.
Scott?
Oh, board member Earl, go ahead.
I'm wondering if maybe they want to look at this a little closer, if we want to hold this one more month, just so that they can make sure we've got, kind of talk to people in their areas and make sure we've got the right measurement tool there, instead of us just trying to pull something together real quick.
Betty Sue, how is that like for time sensitivity? And Jeff?
We have the application. Hopefully we wanted to get that going in the next, by June, but we can make this effective in the next year instead of this. I think that would be fine.
If we can do it in the next, like by our next board meeting, would you be able to get it going?
I think so, yeah.
Because I don't want to hold off for a year. So Go ahead, Jenny.
If we are doing a mini standards and assessment with our next board meeting, right? Possibly, this could be just an easy fix. I just don't want us to put something in and have it not really be the right measurement tool. I feel like we might want to touch base with a few people, make sure we got the right thing there.
Right. I just don't want to delay this because it's very important. But I think if we
Sure.
can make these quick changes, have you guys double check, Jeff, Betty Sue, and then we can vote on it really quick next time, if that would be okay.
Or could we approve this with amendments that fit the intent and then just vote on it in board meeting?
Agree.
Would that move things along a little quicker?
Yes.
My apologies for not getting these out earlier. I've been kind of operating on a shoestring like many of us have the last couple of weeks. And so this happened. I mean, my notes are from last night at 11 o'clock, so I'm sorry.
Well, Scott, would you want to make that motion? Because I think that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I have one more.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll make a motion.
Okay, great.
Line 85 on my copy says that the superintendent may require an LEA to do the following and collect some data. I always run into that word may and wonder why we say may and not shall. Is this data required, or is there some trigger that would make the superintendent request it? Or why is that not a shall?
I actually would prefer a shall.
Generally, I would too. If we think that data is important, I think the shall should be in there so there's no trigger, there's no ambiguity about whether they have to produce it or not.
Yes, I agree with that.
Jeff, do you have any comment on that?
Nope, that's an easy fix.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion then that we adopt or that we approve the rule as amended with the latitude given to staff to adjust lines 64 and 65 on my copy to fit the intent of the not supplanting sourcing language. I'm sorry, Norley, this is not good. And have that revised draft be presented to the full board for approval.
Okay, let me make sure, and we'll make sure, Nora Lee, you've got it down okay. The motion is to approve R277415 draft 1 as amended. And those amendments are dealing with lines 64 and 65 to give staff the latitude to change it to create the intended meaning. Is that correct?
Yes.
You got that? And then are there any other places we've taken care of the may and the shall? We fixed the 37 to 38. So we only need to deal with 64 and 65. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, those would be the only ones that are still open for staff to fix before the board meeting.
Okay, so I think what we're going to state in the motion is this. The committee approves R277415 draft 1 as amended with lines 64 and 65 being changed by staff. Is that good?
Good enough for me. Yeah, with wording for 64 and 65 to be determined by staff.
Yes, to be determined by staff. And then we would forward the rule to the board for approval on a second and final reading. So let me see if there's discussion to that motion. I don't see any hands, but if you are hiding your hand, speak up. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, let's go through one. Board Member Marsh.
Aye.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So Nora Lee, you got it?
I got it.
Oh, you are the best. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. And we are on to our last action item. Okay, so this is action item number 5, R277736. This is the juvenile court or law enforcement notice and information dissemination. And I believe Jeffrey Van Holten is going to talk to us about what this means and why we need it.
Yes. So as you'll notice on the screen, line 10, there is a reference to 53G 8404.
Yes.
We currently have a requirement in code that the board make rules governing the dissemination of information related to a student charged with a violent felony. And so essentially what we're doing here is creating the rule that we need to have. It was discovered when we were looking at House Bill 111, which did not pass in the session. It was going to amend the section of code. We realized that this rule is needed, and so we are bringing this rule forward so that we can be in compliance with the existing code. The idea here, notice information is defined to be just the notification that an LEA would receive from either law enforcement or the juvenile courts, depending on which part of the process we're in with the student, regarding whether or not the student has been taken into custody or adjudicated for the criminal offenses listed in that section of code 78A. Those two references there on line 20 and 21 on the screen. So the rule is pretty short and straightforward in that we reference, I will actually jump down and I'll highlight in a minute why I have the blue here. This is a suggested amendment from USSA, the Superintendent's Association. But I wanted to jump up back to the multidisciplinary team definition. We currently use, sorry, I'm losing my voice this morning. We currently use the multidisciplinary team concept in section 8 of Rule 400. You'll notice I said means the same as the term is used rather than defined, because it's not actually like a straight out multidisciplinary team means X in 400-8. In 400-8, we highlight what a multidisciplinary team is and the suggested membership of a multidisciplinary team. The reason we haven't provided an extreme hardline definition on this is we've had comments from LEAs wanting flexibility on what and who the team consists of. So you'll notice in Rule 400, if you pull it up, -8, there's a discussion of what the team is and what they do, as well as what suggested membership is. LEAs did not want to get tied down to a membership has to be a teacher, the janitor, whomever. They wanted to make sure they had some flexibility. So I did want to call that piece out because I know there were some questions about what it is we're referring to here in the multidisciplinary team concept. The reason why that's important is essentially the way that this rule reads, as you've probably already seen. We are encouraging and asking that principals, when they can, before they start sharing this information out to relevant staff members, once they've been contacted by the LEA saying you have a student who has been arrested or tried for X offense, that the principal would consult the multidisciplinary team and assess the level of threat the student would pose to the school population or themselves, and then share the information accordingly to relevant staff. So the multidisciplinary team and the teaming concept is really central to the way that we're handling the dissemination of information. This is currently going on already in schools. They usually get together and with the team and decide how they're going to disseminate the information. But you will notice these blue lines that I have added here, starting on line 29 to 31. On Wednesday, when we met with the Superintendent's Association, they did point out that Section 1, as currently written, is a school principal shall consult the team before they share the information. And they wanted a little more flexibility because there could be moments where pulling a team together and consulting with them would take too much time with the information they have, and they need to act more quickly. So on lines 29 to 31, I've added that a school principal may share the information without consulting the multidisciplinary team when it demonstrates possible imminent harm to self or others, just so that they have that flexibility to share the information more quickly if there are more imminent issues that they need to address. With that, I'm open to any questions regarding this role.
Good, thank you. Do we have any questions for Jeff? Oh, Board Member Hanson. Scott, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
Said I've been hogging the airtime for the last little bit. So if someone else wants to go first, that's fine. Let them speak, and then I'll come back afterwards.
Let's see. Do I see any other hands? Oh, Board Member Earl.
My question was around the multidisciplinary team, and I did look up R277, and I'm understanding from what you're saying, we want to keep that pretty vague. Is that what I'm understanding?
We do want to keep it a little more vague. In that section, in that rule, we do give the listed suggested membership. We did not want,
because I'm not seeing that. That's why I'm asking that question. I'm under R277400-8, and I'm not actually seeing a listing of it anywhere. I'm seeing teams, interagency case management teams, but I'm not actually seeing. And maybe I'm in the wrong section or something.
Chair, I'm going to pull up 400 so we can.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, just and maybe, like I said, I'm hoping I'm.
Just jump down. Are you able to see that I'm on the website and moving to 400? Is that visible?
We can just see a big gray blob right now.
Yeah.
Got it. Well.
This? Now do you see?
Good.
I will jump down to.
This is Janet. Can I just say that I couldn't find the multidisciplinary team listed anywhere in 400.
Well, it says on line 4 right there. An LA multidisciplinary school team may include.
100-8 is what they gave us.
So this is, and I rule from our website. One thing I should highlight, if you go to the administrative rules site, their version of our rules is behind.
Okay, that's where I'm at. So
Okay.
that's why it didn't make sense.
But what you have on the screen is what you recently passed this a couple months ago, so that may be why it's not showing on the administrative rules website.
Okay. Thank you. That is making this works. It makes more sense.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Jenny, did you have any other questions?
The only other question I had is that this rule we're dealing with only plays out with extreme cases. What was the did you say felony? What was the
Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, so it's essentially violent felonies. So do you see the rule again on my screen?
Yes.
You back? Okay, good. You'll see right here, I'm going to highlight for you these sections of code, 78-6, 112, 3B.
Okay.
Those are the only offenses we're dealing with in this rule. So this rule is not going to deal with other information that an LEA may receive outside of these specific crimes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure, because if it was, yeah, this answers my question. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. So when I went back and reviewed the code sections, it looks like the reporting, so this is 53G8 400 onto 405. Says juvenile court or law enforcement agencies are going to release information to a school superintendent. I think a lot of this was drafted without thinking about charter schools and other LEAs, and we probably need to go back with the legislature and address that somehow, because it refers to district superintendent in many areas. So just a note, I guess, for the future that we should be somehow wording that so it says LEA or includes the charter school setup as well. So there's a clear contact. And where we have so I'm on line 20, and we refer to, this is back to the rule. I've got it. So we say by an LEA pursuant to these subsections. That probably should say an LEA or school. We have that language up above in the rule, LEA and school. And then the line 21, 78A6 117 was revised not too long ago, and I think that now we're on C instead of B. So check that reference. And then I had the question about multidisciplinary teams because I looked at the administrative rules version as well. Thanks for the advice. We'll try to stay up to speed. I have a question on line 37. So the multidisciplinary team is going to use an evidence-based threat assessment. Are we going to provide that from the state board, or where do they get the evidence-based threat assessment? Because when we
Sure. So, and on the line, I believe we've got either Christy or Corby who can maybe answer a little bit more of it. I'll attempt at first, and then Christy or Corby can maybe correct me. But there are several nationally recognized evidence-based threat assessment models that can be used. We do have here at USBE the resources to provide LEAs samples and links to get into those models, but that's where I'll pass it over to maybe Christy or Corby if you're on the line and can highlight a little bit more what we do have.
This is Christy Walker, Safe and Healthy Schools Coordinator. As far as the evidence-based threat assessment, we did even recently have a comprehensive student threat assessment guidelines training. This training is conducted by Dr. Dewey Cornell out of Virginia. It used to be known as the VSTAG. It is now the CSTAG, Comprehensive Student Threat Assessment Guidelines. We also had a train the trainer just, we're talking last week. And so at this point, we have had hundreds of school staff trained already in this, and we have the capacity to train even further. Outside of the CSTAG, we also have Sigma, which is a nationally recognized evidence-based threat assessment program. They do things that are a little bit more comprehensive, but they also have a school-specific stream. Yeah, so there is a lot of resources available for schools to be utilizing an evidence-based threat assessment.
Thank you for the information. My question is probably more concise. I didn't word it very well. Does the state board need to approve this evidence-based threat assessment? Does it need to be one approved or provided by us, or can the LEA or the charter or whoever that is, can they pick their own assessment tool and call that evidence-based threat assessment?
You know, at this point, maybe Jeff can clarify on this a little bit, but this rule does not state that it has to be one approved by us. So the evidence
should it be one approved by us, I guess is the question.
And I think that's where we would like some flexibility for the LEAs as well, because we do have LEAs that, although we are standing behind the CSTAG as an evidence-based program, many of our LEAs are also utilizing Sigma, so we can put together some resources for them to choose from. And Jeff, I'll just defer to you on what you think about including that in the rule itself.
Sure. And I'm actually pulling up right now. We do define evidence-based in the rule. So I'm going to actually.
I saw that, and it refers back to another rule or something, doesn't it?
It does. It refers back to code. So now on my screen, you should be able to see the code of evidence-based, and I do want to highlight. This is actually, I'm glad you're asking this question because it just occurred as we're all having this conversation. 1A Romanet 3 says been approved by the state board.
Okay.
We would need to make sure the resources are brought to this committee and then to the full board for approval. Otherwise, if we don't want to go that route and want more flexibility, we should take out the definition of evidence-based in the rule.
Okay, and my proposal then for the motion that I'll make is that we include approved by the state board in the rule on line 37.
Okay.
And then two more. Lines 43 and 44 in the rule. Well, I guess it starts at 42. A school principal and the school's multidisciplinary team may only share the information and data needed to ensure the safety of the student or the school's general population. I think we need to add the safety of the victim there because that's part of the information that would come from juvenile justice is if there's a victim that's in the superintendent and the victim needs to be protected as part of this. That's one of the purposes of sharing the information.
So on the screen, the blue text I added, does that reflect what you would like to see?
That's fine. More, line 47, when I went to R277-613, we just updated that and it's now parent 12. So it's 10 became 12 because of the revisions that were just adopted in the board meeting yesterday.
Thank you.
That's what I have, and I make a motion that we adopt the rule, or that we approve R277-736 as amended, pass it on to the full board for approval.
Okay, so we have a motion before the committee. The motion is the committee approve R277-736 draft 1 as amended. And we might need to go through those amendments just to make sure we've got them clear. Do you want us to, Nora Lee, do you want us to go through those amendments?
Yes, let's review that again.
Okay, so Scott, make sure we've got them all. The as amended would be on line 37, we add in the rule approved by the state board. Good?
Yes.
Thumbs up or a yes. On lines 42 to 44, we added safety of the victim.
Yes.
Scott, does your amendment does it include the inclusion of what the Utah State, the USSB added as well?
Yeah, we're amending the version that Jeff
okay.
is presenting on the screen. I did have one more on line 20. It should say an LEA or school.
Yeah, I've done it.
And on 21, I believe it's 1C. So we just need to check that code reference.
Change it from B to C, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
But have Jeff check that. That's what I got when I looked at it, but it's good to have a couple sets of eyes too.
Okay, let me list those again and make sure we have them because there were a couple of others I didn't. So let me start from the top. Well, they're not in order, but I'll just go. So 37, live 37, we have approved by the state board. Lines 42 to 44, we have safety of the victim. Line 50, we changed the number 10 to 12. Line 20, we have an LEA or school. Line 21, we changed B to C. Did we click them all?
That's everything that I have.
That's what I have.
Okay, perfect. So when I say as amended, that's what I mean. So the motion before the committee is to approve R277-736 draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Do we have any discussion to that motion? Looking for hands, or you can just blurt. Okay, let's take a vote on that. Roll call vote. Board Member Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so that motion carries unanimously. And that, everyone, concludes our action items. Is there anything else anyone needs to say?
I did just want to make one correction. I said Christie and Corby. I also wanted to highlight Rhett Larson is on the line. He is our school safety specialist. I didn't want to leave without highlighting. This is very much in his wheelhouse.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you everyone so much. Great meeting, great catches, great discussion, and thanks for all your work.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, enjoy
Thanks,
your
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Gravitt.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well done.